And then I also understand that a couple of Las Vegas finest, and what I mean by Las Vegas finest are a couple of young ladies who work at one of the establishments outside of Las Vegas have offered him a gold card. You ever need to come visit, come and visit. Uh, it's on us in more ways than one, I'm sure. But anyway, Garoppolo is just this rock star waiting to he didn't ask for that, but
What is up, everyone? Brandon First, aka First Report, representing the First Off the Bench podcast network. Everyone comes off the bench. We are first. Welcome in to another edition of the NFL Weekly, our off-season update, if you will. It's been a few months since we touched on the NFL here on the network after the Super Bowl. Let the dust settle for a bit and let us kind of come in and clean things up. And when I say we, I mean myself and my co-host, Raider Jim Martinez. You can find Mr. Martinez at Raider Jim 1090. How you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing great. Hard to believe. Here we go. Just 2 weeks ago, we were saying hard to believe it's the end of the NCAA basketball season. Now it's hard to believe we're already talking NFL.
Yeah, it seems to be a year-round situation. No matter what, the NFL is always near the top of the sports news spectrum. And this podcast, plenty to get to. We're going to get to, of course, the Commanders sale, some other things going on in that region concerning a certain quarterback up there. Give a little our thoughts on what we've seen in the offseason or in the free agency, first round of free agency, if you will, the pre-draft free agency. And then, of course, check in on both of our teams. Raider Jim, obviously, will cover the Raiders. I will cover the Eagles. And then give a look to next week's draft on the defensive side of things. Obviously, a lot of focus on the offense with those quarterbacks, but there are a lot of prospects on the defensive side. So we will go over those as well. But we are going to start, at least in D.C., the nation's capital, or let's call it Landover, Maryland, technically. Of course, the Washington Commanders are finally being sold, or at least that's what seems to be the case. You never really know until we hit triple zeros, especially with Dan Snyder. This ends Dan Snyder's, or presumably will end Dan Snyder's reign as, in my mind, by far the worst owner in the NFL, and you can make your case in all of sports. Just going through it, multiple sexual assault charges in-house under Dan Snyder. Obviously a situation where the environments, they had a player report card, and I believe the Washington Commanders as a franchise got an F-, the only franchise to do that. And then one of the crazier stories that, just really shows you the type of person Dan Snyder is. You go back to 2009. He sued a 77-year-old grandmother who was a real estate agent and was a season ticket holder for quite some time. And if you know anything about 2008, 2009, you probably know one of the jobs you didn't want to have, unfortunately, was a real estate agent. She couldn't make the payments. She asked if they could please let her out of that contract. Dan Snyder said no. This man, worth over $2 billion, decided to come after your grandmother for $66,000. Now, after, some public outcry, he didn't force her to pay, but I think that really shows you the type of owner that Dan Snyder was. We do have Washington native Josh Harris. He will be the face of the group that presumably will buy the Commanders. But Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? The Washington Commanders look to be finally out from underneath the thumb of Dan Snyder.
Yeah, by all means, he's not that young, but boy, it just seems like he must be centuries old, because he was the prototype for Ebenezer Scrooge. I mean, he truly, truly is. To go after, the story you just told and all the other sordid things that have gone on. And I'm glad to see him gone. I hope he stays out of the league. And to me, on the positive side, it really speaks to to Coach Rivera, to those players that have been there the last couple of years, because as beat up and bloodied as they were, literally, boy, these guys hung in there and they played some okay ball. The best ball, no, but boy, they were more competitive than a lot of us thought they were going to be at the start of the last two seasons. Hats off to them, and I'm hoping this change in ownership really, really plays in favor for Coach Rivera. I know you and I and Coach, all three of us are in agreement that is one quality character and one quality man. And so hats off to the organization. I hope the NFL doesn't take too long to do their review of the deal and just, signs it, endorses it, and gives them the ownership. It's interesting. It's quite a group there. We got old Magic Johnson on board again, and he's got his fingers in the Dodgers. And he's a good guy, and he understands competition and what players need. So hopefully he will have enough say or enough input from that perspective that will help make good, solid decisions on behalf of the organization. Mitchell Rales, the other guy, his brother, and he founded a company called Colfax, which if you ever did anything in industry, commercial engineering and things like that, they were big in industrial pumps. And he's also big in a company called Enovus, which is more medical technology. And then back in the day, I believe it was his dad owned a radio station, and then he took over the radio station. I believe he converted it into a sports talk deal. So he's kind of like a fan, and no pun intended, because he did Thompson fans, but he is a sports fan that wants to be involved. Now, this Josh Harris guy is a different animal. You and I collect baseball cards, football cards. This guy collects sports teams. He's got an MBA out of Harvard. He's got big bucks. He worked as an investor. General partner, managing partner of Philadelphia 76ers, the New Jersey Devils, which means he also owns pretty much the Prudential Center, the Utica Comets of the American Hockey League, Dignitas, which is an esports venture. He's got a controlling interest in Ripken Baseball, which was started and founded by Cal Ripken, which is a youth sports organization. And he's got an 18% interest in the Premier League's Crystal Palace Football Club, which is of the Union of European Football. That's big time. And then he also, at one point, I don't believe he does now, but at one point he did have a small interest in the Pittsburgh Steelers. So this is a guy who wants to have success, who wants to be successful. Watch out for the Commanders over the next couple of years. I have a feeling he's going to do good things for the organization.
Yeah, that's a great call. Thank you for that information on the Crystal Palace. I actually, my stepfather was born in London, in Croydon, and that's his club. They play in the Premier League. So, I hear it all the time. And hey, their nickname, and they don't really have mascots over there, but they're called the Eagles. So, hey, that's right up my alley as well. I know it all comes full circle. It's all about me, remember. But no, I will say, for the franchise, I think you brought up Ron Rivera, and I think he was kind of the perfect yin to the yang. And I don't know if I got those backwards, or yang to the yin, whatever. But you had this Dan Snyder over here, who Ebenezer Scrooge might be the most diplomatic comparison you can give. I'm sure there's some worse comparisons that we're not going to get into here on the pod, but I like that. Ebenezer Scrooge as Dan Snyder, or Dan Snyder as Ebenezer Scrooge, I should say. That works perfectly. But then you, of course, have Ron Rivera, who has been through it all. He's been on the field. He was on some fantastic teams, worked his way up through the defensive side of things, ended up getting a head coaching job, got a little derailed through cancer, fought through that. And if you know the guy, you heard him speak, you're not surprised that he fought and took down cancer. And here he is. He made the playoffs with Taylor Heineke. Now, I know there was kind of a mishmash of quarterbacks that year, but hey, they got the job done. I think they did that all in spite of Dan Snyder. And I will say this, $6 billion for the Washington Commanders. I shudder at the thought. If the Commanders go for $6 billion, the Yankees got to be close to 25, because the Washington Commanders, a lot of times when you look at these sports franchises, you alluded to it earlier when you talked about one of the partners in this owning a portion of the Devils. Well, he also owns a portion in the Prudential Center. Never been to the Prudential Center. Don't really know a whole lot about it. However, I do know, I believe it's called FedEx Field right now. What I know about it is not good. It's kind of, if you know anything about the Oakland A's Coliseum in baseball, it's maybe a step up from that. And that is not an area where you want to be. So, obviously it probably turned into a bidding war, and I still go back to the Don Sterling selling the Clippers, and somehow that goes for $3 billion. The Clippers of all franchises, and this is pre-Kawhi, pre-Chris Paul, pre those guys, and that went for almost $3 billion. So, I think we're seeing the inflation of sports franchises, but if it gets people like Dan Snyder out of there, I'm all for it. But like you said, I think there's a cleanup, an inevitable cleanup that has to come in, kind of, I would say, level it. You have to start from scratch. Obviously stadium and stuff like that is a little tough to deal with, because it's not like Washington, D.C. is just full of acreage for something like that, hence why they were in Landover. But I think they have some cleaning up to do, but as you said, once they kind of get their foundation, the NFC East really has some owners that, for better or worse, might not like Jerry Jones, but he goes out and at the very least he tries to win.
Wants to win.
Yeah, and it might not always work, but you can look and go, okay, well, Jerry's going for it. But that whole division, throw Jeffrey Lurie and the Maras in there as well. That hopefully will kind of take a little bit of a black eye off of that, the ownership of the Commanders. So
I just imagine Ron Rivera over the last few seasons, he gets his guys in the locker room and he says, okay, I got two things for you. Don't read the newspaper. And when the old man walks in here, just smile and nod, but don't engage. I mean, he has to be just ignore the weird uncle that walks into the room. Okay. And we'll take care of business the way we take care of business. And on another side, similar, but not similar. I will say this, let me be nonpartisan here. To all you Charger fans out there, there's hope. Maybe the Spanoses will go by the wayside soon.
Yeah. And look, I am not pro Spanos. I'm the opposite. I'm anti Spanos, but I don't think they were on the level. Now, what Spanos did to the city of San Diego,
not.
Terrible, but we never got to the point of sexual assault running rampant or this or that. Yeah. So Spanos, I would like to see that franchise be sold. And I mean, I feel like for the Spanos right now, I always say this in air quotes. If you're listening, there are air quotes when I say this, but they're NFL poor. They are on the bottom level
Correct.
of owner capital. It's pretty much all tied into that franchise. And the Davis, Mark Davis as well. Now, luckily he's got his own, city and his own stadium. So he's doing much better, but yeah, I think Spanos might be looking around going, oh, we might be able to get 8 billion, 10 billion. And if you know anything about the kind of internal struggle of the Spanos kids, that might be something that's coming soon, but we shall see. But yeah, for now, hopefully the Commanders are out from underneath the thumb of Dan Snyder. But switching to a little south, or actually I shouldn't say that because I don't know the geography that well, but it's at least in the region. We'll move to Baltimore and the situation that's going on with the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson. Just some thoughts here. Obviously, this is getting a little ridiculous. The Baltimore Ravens gave Lamar Jackson a non-exclusive franchise tag, which means he's essentially able to negotiate with other teams like he would be for a free agent or as a free agent. However, the Ravens are given the opportunity to match the offer and keep him under contract. It's very rare. This is the first time, I know it's been used in the past, but it's the first time it's really kind of been used on a player of Lamar Jackson's stature. Now, obviously, Lamar Jackson won a MVP. I'm almost positive it was unanimous, but don't hold me to that. But I know he's won an MVP. He's obviously one of the more exciting players in the NFL over the last few seasons. And this was kind of crazy. Currently, so under the non-exclusive franchise tag, he's playing for just north of $32 million. There are 13 quarterbacks that are getting paid more than Lamar Jackson. And up until 2 days ago, there were 12 before Jalen Hurts' contract, but 13 quarterbacks. And they include, no disrespect to these guys, but they're not at the same level as Lamar Jackson in my mind, Daniel Jones, Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson, and Derek Carr. Now, once again, no disrespect to those guys. Get your money when you can. But if those guys are getting paid more than Lamar Jackson, that's frustrating. And what's very surprising to me is the reluctance of other teams that need a quarterback. I mean, you got Arthur Smith in Atlanta saying, nope, Desmond Ridder is our guy. You can't sit here and tell me you're not willing to give up a first-round pick to have Lamar Jackson and be able to negotiate with a top 5 or top 10. I don't think you can deny that he's a top 10 quarterback. So that's interesting. I do wonder if the narrative of he quit on his franchise, more air quotes for our audio listeners only, going back to last year where maybe he didn't come back from injury as soon as everyone wanted him, but I will never blame him for that. I will say the only conceivable explanation is the narrative out there, and it's been shot down by Lamar Jackson multiple times, but apparently that Lamar wants a fully guaranteed contract, which I would be a little hesitant towards that as well. However, I'd still prefer a fully guaranteed Lamar Jackson over a Desmond Ridder, Ryan Tannehill, Malik Willis, blah, blah, blah. And the other part of it too, Lamar Jackson hasn't hired an agent. Now we're talking about a massive contract that he's expecting to get. I know you don't want to pay those fees, but you need to get someone who knows the ins and outs in there to negotiate on your behalf. And then also we're talking about what a week ago, the Baltimore Ravens decided to give Odell Beckham Jr. $18 million. Just an extra little slap, spit, kick in the shins, whatever you want to call it. It's really perplexing to me. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts on what's going on in Baltimore with Lamar Jackson?
It's an interesting and odd situation. He was the most valuable player in the 2019 season. I just looked it up for us. But if you look at that 2019 season and what has happened since then, he's taken a lot of beating. Mm-hmm. He's put a lot of miles on. He's taken a lot of beating. He hasn't been able to play at times. And again, whether it was legitimate or not, he did all those weeks towards the end of last year where like, nope, sorry, guys, can't do it. Can't do it. My knee, my knee, my knee. And here's what we've got going. It's real elementary to me. First of all, it's like Olympic scoring. You throw out the high or the ridiculous. So Cleveland pays Watson $230-something million, which big mistake, set the bar way up there, which shame on Cleveland. But okay, if that's what you want to do, that's your money. It's like when your parents would give you money and say, okay, you can spend it however you want, but when it's gone, it's gone. And they go out and invest in this guy. That's a lot of money to pay for a bad character. Jalen Hurts on the other side of that, $255 million. That is a deserved contract to me. He's got a lot left. He proved he could do it. Not only did he get to the playoffs, he got to the Holy Grail. He got the trophy. So heck, this guy deserves it. Lamar's never done it. He's never gotten to the Super Bowl. He's never lost the Super Bowl. Yeah, he got the most valuable player, but at this point, you can't say that he is apples to apples with Jalen Hurts because I think he's had too many injuries right now. And the big thing for me, and you already hit on it, that's it. When you are talking anything at this level and you think you're going to represent yourself, you've got to absolutely be kidding me. You can't do that. I'm okay at contract work. I wouldn't think of sitting there and saying, I got this. I want to have people on either side of me. I want to have experts. I actually knew, God rest his soul, he's no longer with us, but I actually knew a gentleman, worked for him for many, many years, and he was a sports agent at one time. He was actually the agent for Alan Page of the Minnesota Vikings and several others. And boy, some of the stuff he told me about, real simple things he would do to negotiate. And along with the money up front, it was how to get those guarantees without making the team say it's a guarantee. Look, we're going to do it like this. This is how we structure. And I think Lamar would behoove himself to go out and retain somebody or some agency. There's plenty out there.
Yeah, I go back to this show was made late 90s, early 2000s, and it was obviously dramatized and more tongue-in-cheek than anything, but there was a show, it was called Arliss. I think it was on HBO or Showtime. It was one of those, pay-per-view type things, blah, blah, blah. And it was about, and I don't remember the actor, I could recognize his face, but he was a sports agent. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions with sports agents is, I'll see you every 3 or 4 years when I'm negotiating your contract. That's not the case. There are a lot of things going forward that you need representation for, whether it's endorsements, whether it's appearances, whether it's just, did you breach your contract because you went out and you rode on the back of your sister's cousin's bicycle or motorcycle? There are so many small fine-tooth comb that, let's be honest, the Baltimore Ravens have an entire staff of people whose entire job, as terrible as it is to write these little hiccups and these things that you can trip yourself up on, that if something were to happen, boom, breach a contract, negate the whole deal. And I don't care, and I'm sure Lamar Jackson is a very bright person, but I don't care how bright you are, unless your angle or your lane is sports contract negotiation and other things. Not only even this would be essentially his first contract negotiation, and it might be a top 5 deal ever. And he's trying to do it himself. I'm not going to, judge anyone by the decisions they make, but I will sit here and say, I think that's a part of this. I think the Ravens are probably lowballing him, but at the same time, I think the fact that Lamar Jackson doesn't have an agent is why he's being lowballed. I'll tell you what, and I don't know if Scott Boras, I don't think he's in the NFL world. He's definitely in the MLB world. You don't lowball Scott Boras because he'll just get up from the table and walk away. And unfortunately for Lamar Jackson, a lot of the leverage right now is towards Baltimore because they can sit here and kind of say, what are you going to do? You have to sign that or you're not playing. And trust me, him not playing next year will not help his cause.
No, 1 year older, and
yeah. And it's a year out of the league, and who knows? Bryce Young, I don't know, one of these kids. I really do think Lamar Jackson is a better investment right now than these younger kids coming out, because you're still going to have to pay them 25, 30 a year on their rookie deals if they're a top 10 pick. What's another $7 million? And I do understand that the guarantee comes into it, and that scares people away. I don't know. I just find it hard to believe that this is happening. And I also want to say, in terms of Lamar Jackson last year not playing those final 5 or 6 games, look, I don't blame you. If that franchise has made it plainly obvious that they're not ready to invest in your future, you need to do what's best for you, especially the way Lamar Jackson played. You talk about a lot of miles on there. Well, 4 or 5 games, I'm sure there was a Steeler game in there. There was a game or two that, would have gotten a situation where, who knows, something happens. RG3 came out and said it. He goes, you got to do what you got to do. He always will regret playing in that playoff game. They were the Redskins back then, bringing it back to Dan Snyder, and that ruined RG3's career. We could have possibly seen something like that for Lamar without getting that big payday. And once again, yeah, these guys are paid a lot of money, but they have 10, 15 years to make that money. There is no pension age or the normal pension age for athletes. So it's a sticky situation. And I think the hardest part right now is we're only getting probably about 25 to 30% of the actual facts, which is fine. But looking at it with those facts, you just kind of have to shake your head and wonder what else is out there, because there is a lot more. So,
and that also plays back into the locker room to a degree. Mm-hmm. What's the coach? What is the offensive coordinator? How are they really supposed to develop their offensive scheme for the coming year if they don't know what's really going to happen? Because you're going to design that for Lamar Jackson if he's in. You're not going to design it the same way for another guy. Mm-hmm. So it's really too bad. This is now we're affecting the entire organization.
Exactly. And it's not like the Ravens are, had the success that the Patriots had, to where Tom Brady left and it was like, okay, well, we had our fun, but it's time to move on. It's been one Super Bowl, or, well, at least in the Harbaugh era, one Super Bowl. And that's pretty much it. Even the 2019 MVP Lamar season, I think they were 1 or 2 seed, and I don't think they made it out of the divisional weekend. So, we'll see how that goes going forward. But heading to the other side of it, some of these deals that have been completed, or at least most of the deals that have been completed. I'm going to start with mine. I was going through the list of all the players that have been signed up. I think one of the most active teams is obviously very close to Raider Jim's heart, the Raiders. Very active, obviously bringing in Jimmy Garoppolo, Amir Abdullah, who I've always been a fan of, and Jacoby Myers. Interesting to see there. They did part ways with Darren Waller. We'll see how that plays going forward. The Saints try to do the Drew Brees 2.0, take an AFC West cast-off quarterback and try and bring him up to a Hall of Fame level. We'll see if that's there for Derek Carr. He's heading to New Orleans. And then a very, very interesting, I really do like this little saying I just came up with. The Giants gave Daniel Jones the bag and Saquon the tag. Once again, another non-exclusive tag. You like that? And then the last bit of kind of off-season news that has caught my attention. I think we have to be getting ready to call up the people at Guinness, because I believe we're getting to the world's longest trade negotiation. About 6 weeks ago, it was announced Aaron Rodgers was going to the Jets. We're 10 days away from the draft, and Aaron Rodgers is not officially a Jet. So I wonder if maybe they're just wondering, hey, why don't you go pick the players you're going to pick in the draft? And maybe we want one of those, or, instead of trading the pick, take this guy and then we'll trade him for you. Obviously some T's to cross and I's to dot in that deal. But Raider Jim, what are your thoughts on the offseason thus far?
Yeah, it's interesting. You hit on a lot of them. Of course, Jimmy G got 67.5. I think Derek Carr got 150 and a couple extra years on that. I will tell you, Garoppolo gets this team over 500. If he gets them 12 wins, he's going to look like a superstar out there. And he got the base to do it. We'll see what happens, but I'm kind of glad to see him in there. I think he's going to be a good fit for the offensive scheme. They also they're trying to cover the move of Waller. they brought in Juwan Johnson at 2 years, $12 million, or they gave him that bonus, which is a good deal for them. I will tell you some of the interesting things in free agency that I'm seeing. Josh Jacobs, their franchise tag that guy, he has not signed yet. He still has not signed. Waller got pushed over to it was the Giants, I believe. He has not signed yet. So, boy, these franchise tag things could blow up on everybody. They're going to be sitting right there with Lamar Jackson. Who knows? And I wish Coach was on the team because the Raiders have been very, very active. But I don't know if they have been as active or not as active as the Saints. Those guys are going nuts out there doing different things. You know, they got Juwan Johnson. I made that wrong. That was actually the tight end that they brought in for Derek Carr. See, I look at my notes, I see Derek Carr, I automatically think the Raiders.
Immediate.
That tight end was brought in for Derek Carr, 2 years, $12 million. But they also, on the other side of the ball, they got these two defensive tackles, Nathan Shepard and Kalen Saunders. And let me tell you, 3 years, $15 million for Shepard, 3 years, $14 million for Saunders. That defense was good as it was. Now they've got more incentive to go out there and just really rack it up. I do have on my notes the Jones and Barkley pair out there in Giantland, and they've got it. But again, it's that Waller's hanging out there. They bring in Waller, though, and that's going to be good. Jets giving Allen Lazard 4 years, $44 million. To me, that right there that's the carrot that they're dangling, I think, in front of Aaron Rodgers. Rodgers has to have a familiar target. He lost Adams, but now he's got Lazard out there in New York. That wouldn't be a bad thing. The other free agency move that I'm waiting to see, will it happen? And that is Ezekiel Elliott to Cincinnati.
Ooh.
I can't believe what has gone on with Joe Mixon and what's hanging out there. And they're going to need somebody to probably step into that position. And why not Elliott? Okay, you know, love him, hate him, love Jerry Jones, as you said earlier in the podcast. Hey, the guy can probably still play ball. Another key to that is he happens to be represented by the same agent or agency as Ja'Marr Chase. So there you are, something to keep in mind. Oh, yeah, Jalen Ramsey to the Dolphins is another move.
Sorry, who is that?
Jalen Ramsey to the Dolphins.
Yes.
That move, that secondary just got a lot better, and they weren't too bad to start with.
Yeah, I think these franchise tags now are kind of turning into, the world's most expensive game of chicken, because that's essentially all it is right now. Right now the leverage is probably with the team, depending on what player we're looking at. But as we get closer to the season, once again, I think the leverage starts to get towards the player, because the team's going to want most of these players on the field. And the teams are going to look around and go, hey, no one's signing you. Might as well just come over here. And who knows, maybe their agent's saying this team's sniffing or that team's sniffing, but they're not going to do it for a few weeks. Well, Josh Jacobs isn't going to run onto the field and put himself at risk while his agent's saying that, the Commanders want his services. However, they can't do anything. And I believe, if I remember correctly, I should have checked this earlier before I brought it up, but it is what it is. I believe these players can sign with these other teams, or up until week 10, I believe, of the new season. So it would be very interesting to see, week 6, week 7, maybe some of these players wait for the inevitable wave of injuries in training camp, preseason, early season. And they're kind of out there going, hey, here I am, come and get me. And they have to pay a lot, but they get what they need. It's going to be very interesting going forward to see how the franchise tags do end up shaking out. Like I said, big, expensive game of chicken, with, let's be honest, people that have very large egos. So we'll see exactly how that goes. Yes, sir.
Yeah. And, looking down the list, team by team by team, I will say one thing that I saw. So there are some smart guys out there. There are a lot of offensive linemen who got a nice little bump or a nice little offer, and that's good to see. Sometimes those are the underrated guys, or the guys you don't hear. They certainly don't get the press because they got a nice signing bonus or a nice extension. But a lot of teams are investing in those defensive linemen and those offensive linemen.
Yeah, I think that's I know you've always been a big proponent when we break down the games, during the season, the big uglies up front, whether offensive or defense, that can really get the job done. And it's not obvious to the conventional fan, but you do see it eventually when you continue to watch football, that those trenches are a big region to control and be successful. So we shall see. And once again, free agency, like I said, it's kind of broken up into two tiers. It's the first week, essentially, it's a flurry of deals, maybe some trades sprinkled in, and then we kind of go all quiet on the Western Front. The draft happens, everyone kind of sees where they are, and then we get round two of free agency where teams start to dip their toes in. I think that's when we'll see the Ezekiel Elliott's, and who knows, maybe someone comes sniffing around, for the Josh Jacobs, or hey, maybe one of these teams at the top of the draft, something crazy happens, they don't get the quarterback they want, and maybe they finally say, okay, it's time to take a chance on Lamar. But still about 3 months before we all kind of really know how all the dust has settled on that, but we have a pretty good idea for now. But it is time to dive into our team reports, and we're going to start with Raider. Jim, give us an idea. We've kind of definitely glossed a little bit over it, but dive a little deeper into what the Las Vegas Raiders are doing this offseason.
Yeah, Garoppolo, okay, we all know that's a done deal, 3 years, $67.5 million. And I like to think, because I remember back in the day, there's something about Garoppolo, and I can see him bringing that same kind of flair that Stabler used to bring into the locker room and into the huddle, and just loosen up these guys, have a good time. But I think he's going to be able to execute if they give him the right tools around him. And then I also understand that a couple of Las Vegas finest, and what I mean by Las Vegas finest are a couple of young ladies who work at one of the establishments outside of Las Vegas, have offered him a gold card. You ever need to come visit, come and visit. It's on us in more ways than one, I'm sure. But anyway, Garoppolo is just this rock star waiting he didn't ask for that, but it's there. And it's this, I think he and the city are going to get along very, very well. I think they would have done well to hang on to Waller, although maybe with that little bit of injury he had last season, maybe the Raider upper management picked up on something. Maybe it was an attitude along with the injury, and they thought, before this gets any worse, let's go ahead and cut the ties and shake hands while we're all still being gentlemen. Let's hope Josh Jacobs signs. It's too bad to see him play as well as he did last year. It took him that many seasons to put together a good run, but he played a hell of a season last year. He deserves that franchise tag, in my estimation, and now I just hope he signs it. Keeping Jakobi Meyers, a good move. That was a good thing. They should have hung on to on the other side of the ball. I was sorry to see Perryman go. I think he was one of the stronger players in the linebacking core. Get it? He missed a couple games himself, but we'll see what happens with this new crew that they bring in. Unfortunately, I go back to it kind of sums up the whole Raider management and player management, if you will. They brought in, I think it was Martinez was his last name, right? The linebacker. And
yes.
Halfway into the season, he says, hey, man, I just sold a Pokemon card. I'm out. And that's just kind of how the Raider moves have gone. Everybody was all excited years ago. Oh, they got Jamarcus Russell. He can sit on his butt at the 20-yard line, hit the other end zone. Yeah, but unfortunately, he was supposed to throw it 30 yards out in the flat. He just he couldn't do it. So I hope they get in the right people. Rock Ya-Sin, they need to get him signed. Is he the best defensive back in the league? Not by any stretch, but he's a go-getter. He's a player. He is there 100%, 110% every time he's in the lineup. I would say sign that kid. A thing just came out today that there is talk and rumor that maybe Budda Baker, the safety from Arizona, may be looked at by the Raiders. That would be interesting. The thing is, it's going to cost you more. They're not going to give up their first-round pick by any chance, their number 7 pick. I don't think they're going to be able to just throw the 70 pick out there, and Arizona's going to say, okay, might have to give up that middle pick, which is like 35, 38, something like that. Plus, Baker's going to want a lot of money. But when you look at what the secondary has done, maybe it's time to start investing some money there. So we'll see what materializes from all that talk. Probably the most important thing to me that the Raiders really need to look at is they need to lock up Andre James, the center. Again, back to the offensive lineman. Is he the best center in the game? Not by any stretch, but he's young, and he did very, very well. He and other guys were opening bigger holes for Josh Jacobs than Jacobs had seen his entire term with the Raiders at this point. This kid's good, and he's just going to develop. He is going to be that cornerstone guy, kind of like a Rodney Hudson. So I do hope they take a good look at Andre James, give him the money, get out of UCLA, heck of a player, lock him up. You want to keep Garoppolo safe, lock up James.
Yeah. I tell you what, I had to bring myself back down because that Jimmy G whoa, I'm glad you didn't end on that, because it may have just been 30 seconds of me just smiling and trying to get my composure back together. That was absolutely fantastic. But yeah, that was a big story. And you know what? Good for everyone involved. Everything consensual, and it's, behind closed doors. Do what you got to do. But make sure you're ready to go on Sunday. That is for sure. But definitely interesting stuff would be coming out for the Raiders. I tell you what, that Budda Baker pick, that would be a huge pickup. May need to go into next year's draft and give up a first round pick, which might be a little scary if you are a Raider fan.
And I know we've got draft picks down towards the end of our show here, but I will tell you the other note that I have under the Raiders is I know they're looking at him. He's one of their top two as far as I know, but I hope they really give a good hard look at their first pick being Joey Porter Jr. out of Penn State, a 6'2.5" cornerback, weighs 190 pounds. That boy can hit, and he's fast, and he's got long hands, long arms, and they have needed a quarterback with size and stature like that. And he's also a good, smart player, knows how to play the position.
Is that Joey Porter's son?
That'd be him.
Oh boy. So yeah, I can already tell he's got some intensity. Maybe a little leaner than Dad, because Dad was a pretty imposing linebacker. But hey, he's got the football genes, he's got the intensity, and he's got a borderline Hall of Famer as a mentor as well. But I've definitely seen that name definitely tossed around in the top 10. Going to be very interesting to see. But yes, we will get to some defensive prospects here in a bit. My turn to kind of go over what's been going on with the Eagles. And up until about 48 hours ago, it was a relatively quiet offseason. As most teams, a lot of players go, some players come in, and you don't really know how everything's going to mesh together. However, yesterday's big news, the kind of the end of the saga of Jalen Hurts' contract extension. Big news, as 5 years, $255 million, nearly 180 of that 255 is guaranteed to go along with that no trade clause. Couldn't have happened. Raider Jim brought it up earlier. Could not have happened to a more deserving player. I think everything Jalen Hurts has gone through, you go back to him at Alabama in the national championship game, gets benched, and in this age of transfer portal, doesn't take, and I don't want to say the easy way, but doesn't take that way out. Instead says, no, I want to graduate as a member of the Crimson Tide. And if I have to beat Tua out, I will. He actually doesn't beat Tua out. However, Tua does get hurt. I believe halftime of an SEC championship game the final year, Jalen Hurts wins them the SEC championship, and then does very well in the playoff to kind of come in, and then ends up having to go to Oklahoma. And I think there were a lot of people who doubted him there. He goes, and I believe he won the Heisman, or at the very least he was a finalist, and then gets picked by the Eagles, who everyone thought had their quarterback. Once again, myself included, I thought it was a bad pick. I didn't know what the Eagles were doing. And now Jalen Hurts, if he didn't get hurt towards the end of the year, I think he would have been MVP. And if the Eagles win the Super Bowl, he would have undoubtedly been Super Bowl MVP. So this is a very a deal that for the moment makes him the highest paid player in NFL history. I assume in the next month, when Cincinnati and Joe Burrow get everything finalized, Burrow's deal will be 256, just because that's how agents and players want to do it. That's fine. I'm sure Jalen Hurts thinks it's fine. He's getting his bag. Joe Burrow, as I said, more than likely will get just a little bit more to kind of, get that market pushing up a little bit. Elsewhere, unfortunately for the Eagles, one of my, favorite players, Miles Sanders, he's moved on. He's heading to Carolina. And then the Eagles do bring in former Aztec for life, Rashad Penny. And they also bring in El Gigante Pequeño, a.k.a. Boston Scott. He's been re-signed. And there's been a lot of talk about the Eagles possibly at that 10th overall pick, picking up Texas running back Bijan Robinson. That would be a nice pickup as well, to kind of go with that three-headed beast in the outfield, or in the backfield. Watching too much baseball, apologize. On the other side of things, three of the Eagles legends, 3 players that I think will end up in the Eagles Hall of Fame, maybe get their numbers retired. Fletcher Cox, Jason Kelsey, and Brandon Graham all signed 1-year contracts with the Eagles. I know Graham and Kelsey turned down bigger, longer term deals from other teams to come back. So hats off to them to, at the very, as of right now, looks like they're going to retire as Eagles, but they are only 1-year deals. So we'll have to deal with this all over again. And then in one of the, I would say, weirder offseason stories not involving Lamar Jackson or Aaron Rodgers, Darius Slay, he was actually released by the Eagles and in the morning, and by essentially the night, he had re-signed with the Eagles. I think he went out there thinking the grass was going to be greener elsewhere, realized, oh, everyone's pretty much offering me the same amount of money as the Eagles. I might as well go back to Philadelphia, where I know I have an opportunity to win a Super Bowl. And then in a more traditional re-signing, James Bradberry also got an extension. I tell you what, 2 other free agent signings the Eagles have brought in to supplant the defensive backfield. Cornerback Greedy Williams. What a name for a cornerback, by the way, Greedy. Greedy Williams and safety Terrell Edmonds, both been brought in to, let's be honest, they need to shore up that backfield, that defensive backfield that was exposed in the Super Bowl by Patrick Mahomes. So I really do think that's going to be something to keep an eye on for the Eagles going forward. But obviously the big news in Birdland is Jalen Hurts signed up for the next 5 years. And I think that really does set a great, keeps that window open, if you will, for at least 3 or 4 years. I don't expect Jalen Hurts to regress. I don't expect Jalen Hurts to go Albert Haynesworth, where he gets a big contract and then disappears. Just listening to the way this guy talks, everything he's gone through, I don't think this changes him. And I'm also going to give him a huge shout out. He is, I don't want to say the only, but I do want to say the first, because I'm pretty sure about that. First NFL player to be represented by an all-female management, agent, marketing, communications, all of that, all-female representation. That's fantastic. Good for him to entrust that to them, and great for them to show that loyalty truly does pay off, and hopefully set the groundwork for other athletes, either this firm or other female-led firms, to get into the game as well, not just in football, but in all of sports in this country. So it's going to be very interesting going forward for the Eagles. But like I said, I think with Jalen Hurts at the helm, the future is bright. But moving on to our final segment, we're going to be looking ahead to the NFL draft, which is going down next week, next Thursday, 10 days from now, or 9 days from now, I should say. And we're going to be looking at the defensive side of the ball. Raider Jim, I'll give you the honors to get us started. Who are you looking at as some of these top defensive prospects that we'll be seeing as rookies next year?
We could have probably done the entire segment on this.
Yeah.
There are so many good players out there. It's nice to see. So I've really pared down my list quite a bit, and I think it's still a little too long. On the line side of things, of course, what do you say about Jalen Carter? He's the cream of the crop. He is the guy. He's probably going to be the first lineman to go. If not, something's not right in the NFL. There's another guy out there from Pitt, Khalid Kancey. A little small for a defensive lineman, they say. Listen to the guy who's 5'6", weighs $135, saying that guy's small. But anyway, he is kind of small for NFL-sized lineman. However, he makes up for that because he's a fast player and a smart player, but you could probably put him off the ball, kind of do like off the edge, that type of a thing. I can see that very likely. And another player of similar out of USC, another one of those Samoan players that they always seem to have an abundance of these guys, Tui Tuipulotu out of USC. This kid, again, not big enough maybe to be an NFL interior lineman, but this kid play the edge, fast, and back him up off the ball, let him play a little bit of linebacker. Kancey and Tuipulotu, I like those guys. True linebackers out there, Jack Campbell out of Iowa. Guy's just a stud. I mean, he's like old school NFL, where's my lunch pail? I got to go to work. And he's got all the tools too. He's fast, he hits hard, and can cover the ball. From the center of the field, he can cover left, right, no problem. Also, Sanders out of Arkansas. Maybe not the caliber player of Jack Campbell from Iowa, but tell you what, one of the most explosive linebackers in the draft. definitely would be a fit for the Raiders if they could pick him up, but they won't be able to because he's going to go quick, and they need to worry about secondary before they're going to get to a linebacker. Now, I'm not going to get the name right. Henry Tuo, and I can't recall the university either. He is not the best one. He is not the biggest one. However, he's got athleticism galore to compete. The other thing that the other note on him is they say this is probably the most cerebral guy in the linebacking division right now. I would definitely give him a look. The defensive backs that I like out there, of course, I already said it. Joey Porter Jr., Devin Witherspoon from Illinois, and also Christian Gonzalez from up the coast here, Oregon, I believe. That kid is fast, good. He's got what it takes to play in the NFL. So there's some of my defensive picks.
Yeah, obviously, I think more than I feel like for the last 3 or 4 years, the defensive side of things has just been superior to the offensive, and it is unfortunate because while I think we could be in agreement, maybe not on the same player, but I think all of us are in agreement that a defensive player is the best player in this draft. However, more than likely won't be drafted until maybe pick 3 or 4, depending on how trades go down, just because of the needs of the top teams. Carolina and Houston, they're going to need quarterbacks, and you have to get them when they're ready to go, at the top of the draft. So, the CJ Strouds, the Bryce Millers, the Will Levises, and Anthony Richardson from Florida, 3 of those 4, depending on how trades go, they'll go first. But, for me, a lot of the talk has been about the big 3 edge rushers, and Will Anderson, Tyree Wilson, and Lucas Van Ness might be maybe the 3 best players in the draft, let alone 3 best edge rushers. I do believe that these guys have an opportunity, and edge rushers, it's kind of turned into a new position, if you will. Essentially the stand-up, you brought him up, kind of the undersized defensive lineman. And that's what the edge rusher is kind of turned into. I've been hearing a lot, Jalen Carter. I don't quite remember the exact specifics of it, but I do remember Jalen Carter unfortunately had to leave the combine because an arrest warrant was put out for him. And I don't have a follow-up on that or anything. I don't know what quite happened, but I do remember that at Georgia's pro day, he really turned scouts off, as it looked like he was about 20 to 30 pounds overweight, wasn't able to get through a lot of conditioning drills. And I don't think that's a great look for NFL scouts that are looking for a guy to go early in the top, 5. It's going to be very interesting to see if that does affect his draft stock. However, I'm in agreement with you, Raider Jim. If everything is, you take that stuff out and you just look at 60 minutes on the field, I mean, this kid may be one of the best prospects we've seen in quite some time. And you brought up the USC linebacker. Obviously a long lineage of Samoan players coming out of USC. Obviously, Troy Polamalu is one of the first one that comes to mind. Ray Malaluga, Lofa Tatupu, who's still kicking, I believe, in the league, and many others out there. He's following in those footsteps, and he was on a defense that, I'm a USC fan. He was the really only bright spot of that defense. There were a lot of holes in that defense. They were averaging 38 to 41 points allowed per game, still almost made the playoff. But I do think that does help because, look, a lot of these guys, they're going to go from the Bamas, the Georgias, the USCs winning 10, 12 games a year. It might take you 3 or 4 years on some of these teams to get 12 wins in the NFL.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
So I think to have that, because I do think that does mess with a lot of these kids. When you're a top draft pick, you are uber successful, and your team, I mean, from high school all the way to college athletics, you've been very successful, and now you're going to kind of get the other end of the stick where it doesn't matter what you do. You could have the greatest game ever. You still might lose 31-17, 10, 12, 13, 14 games a year. How do you deal with that mentally? How do you show up for practice week 13 when your team's been eliminated? You have family in town. How do you deal with the mundaneness?
You don't walk in king of the locker room.
Exactly. And yeah, and that's the other thing too. You have to come in and you have to be humble. I don't care if you're coming to the Texans and you're Bryce Young and you show everyone your trophies and your Heisman and stuff like that. Those guys don't care. To you or to them, you're still just a punk rookie who hasn't proved anything at this level. And believe me, you got I always go back to one of the best football movies ever. Don't watch it with kids, but I really do think it is a great look into football culture, and it's Any Given Sunday. And I'll always forget Steamin' Willie Beeman, Jamie Foxx, his character, a hot shot quarterback, comes up, all eyes on him. They go to a team party. Lawrence Taylor is the actor. I don't forget the name of the character, but I mean, Lawrence Taylor essentially plays Lawrence Taylor in the movie. And halfway through the party, someone tells Jamie Foxx, "Hey, go look at your car." And Lawrence Taylor has cut his car in half and says, "Football's about two sides, offense and defense. You can't have one without the other." And that's what some of these kids are going to have to learn, that there are those leaders in the locker room that aren't going to let you be that shriveling little prima donna. And they're going to put you in their place really, really quick. So it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. We are planning on recording next week as well, and focusing on the offensive side of things and what our teams, what we'd like to see our teams do as we head towards draft night. But Raider Jim, final thoughts for this kind of first edition of the NFL offseason update.
Well, now I wish it was opening weekend, and I thought and there was going to be a kickoff on Saturday, because let's just get past the draft, let's get past the training camps, and let's just start playing ball. This was fantastic to have this discussion with you. I'm glad you let me be part of it.
Always wouldn't be able to do this without you and Coach. Ideally, we get Coach back next week, but I know it's kind of a crazy week for him as he's right in the middle of his season, his San Diego City Knights tennis team, doing what they do. Been kind of keeping an eye on him, and no surprise, they're doing very well thanks to under the tutelage of Coach. Unfortunately, weren't able to get him on, but he hopefully will be back next week. But he's fighting a good fight for a lot of kids who really do enjoy what he teaches. And my final thoughts, as the puppy makes an appearance, my final thoughts, as always, I just want to shout out Gray Space. They've been doing just such a fantastic job, not only putting these videos together, putting the shorts together, making it easier for you all to digest. It was kind of frustrating on my end. I knew the best way to go about it, but I didn't really know how or have the time to do it. And it was so tough because we put so much work in, whether you agree with us or not, we put a lot of work in to getting our, notes together, things like that, and making sure we know what we're talking about. Once again, whether you agree with us or not, we put a lot of work into getting this all together on our side of it. And for us now to kind of just be able to pass these files off to the professionals and they get it out into your feed, able for you to digest it a little easier. Because look, as much as I love football, I know it's hard to sit down for 50 minutes and watch a podcast, just over and over. So I just want to shout them out. If you're like us, you're on the content side of things and you're having trouble getting reach, you're having trouble getting videos put together, or you're just having trouble with that side of it, make sure you give Gray Space a click. I'm going to make sure that they hopefully put their link in the description. But if not, make sure you reach out to us and we'll get you in touch if that doesn't work. So with that, Thank you, Gray Space, and thank you to all of you who have listened to the First Off the Bench podcast, the NFL Weekly presented by the First Off the Bench podcast network. Everyone comes off the bench. We are first. It's time for y'all to go wash your hands and stop hating everybody. We'll talk to y'all very soon. Take care.
Peace out.